there's an unwritten rule among former presidents that you don't criticize the sitting commander-in-chief. But in today's political climate, that rule has all but gone out the window. Former U.S. presidents have criticized Trump's policies or leadership style at one point or another. And in a new book called The Last Republicans, Bush 41 and Bush 43 take direct aim at President Trump, calling him a blowhard and expressing concerns that he doesn't know what it means to be U.S. president. CNN special correspondent Jamie Gangel sat down with the book's author for an inside look at that incredibly candid conversation.
Former President Bush 43 told you when Trump entered the race, he thought
interesting, won't last.
Won't last.
Won't last. But when Trump started to rise, I think he became concerned because he saw this populism of Donald Trump getting in the way of America's position in the world.
He gave you rare insight, though, into his criticism of Donald Trump. What did he tell you?
One of the things he said was that one of the hallmarks of great leadership is humility. So when Donald Trump said, "I am my own advisor," Bush thought, and this is a quote, "Wow, this guy doesn't know what it means to be president."
What was his tone when he talked to you about Trump?
I think it was restrained. The Bushes are very restrained. And I also think that they realize they have a role to play as former presidents. And they have to be restrained. They have to be dignified.
He weighed his words.
I think he did, yes.
President Bush 41 was a bit blunter. He said that he thought Donald Trump had, quote, a certain ego, and then he told you point blank,
he's a blowhard. Oh. He's a blowhard. And I don't like him, plain and simple. And I'm not excited about him being a leader, was his quote. And if you look at the Bush family, it makes perfect sense. Donald Trump is everything that the Bush family is not. George Bush grew up thinking about the greater good. Donald Trump, I think, is manifestly narcissistic. It's part of his brand. And that brand is the antithesis of the Bush brand.
How do you think these two men feel that Donald Trump is now the standard bearer of the Republican Party?
I think it's pretty clear if you look at their records and their views politically that, I'm going to quote George H.W. Bush, they're not excited about Donald Trump being our leader. That's not a leap of faith. That's pretty clear. And I think the most clear demonstration we get of that recently is Charlottesville. The Bushes came out with a joint tweet, which they had never done in the past, condemning bigotry and anti-Semitism and all the things that were on display in Charlottesville among the white supremacists. That was a clear betrayal of American values, and the Bushes came out with that joint statement. I think that spoke resoundingly about the void in leadership that they were seeing from the White House.
There are a lot of quotes from the Bushes that are going to make news in this book. Bush 43 talks about whether Vice President Dick Cheney had played an outsized role in his presidency. Something that gets talked about all the time. Was Dick Cheney too powerful? And Bush 43 told you?
Well, he was talking about the neoconservatives in general, and specifically about Cheney and Rumsfeld. And he said, and I quote, Cheney and Rumsfeld never made one decision.
That's the quote.
That's the quote. I understand his frustration, because at the time there was the perception that Dick Cheney was the acting president. But in fact, George W. Bush had a lifetime of making bold decisions. He has this preternatural confidence in himself as a leader. And if you talk to those around him, they have confidence in his leadership. And so this notion that Cheney was making the decisions is ludicrous.
When you started to write this book, let me guess, the title was not The Last Republicans.
When I set out to write this in 2013, it was a very different time. But The Last Republicans became the right title during what has become the Trump era.
Because?
Well, George W. Bush himself said in 2016, privately, and to me, I fear that I'll be the last Republican president.
He confirmed that to you.
He confirmed that to me. And it wasn't just about Hillary Clinton becoming president. It was because Donald Trump represented everything that the Bushes abhorred.
All right, Jamie Gangel joining us right now. Good to see you, Jamie. So,
hey, Fred.
you know, the Bushes offering very candid thoughts here on Trump, but these are thoughts from them during the campaign, right? But in recent weeks, we did hear candid thoughts from Bush 43. So how have their thoughts, you know, evolved about candidate versus President Trump, you think?
Right. So, first of all, for context, the interviews for this book were done during the campaign, but they are standing by them. No one is saying that they changed their mind. In some ways, this is a surprise because they've been very careful about going on the record. On the other hand, let's remember, neither of these men voted for Donald Trump. President Bush 41 voted for Hillary Clinton. President Bush 43 said none of the above at the top of the ticket. So I don't think it's a surprise big picture. I think they wanted to say these things, and they knew it was going to be out there.
All right, Jamie Gangel, thank you. So the White House is now responding, saying, quote, if one presidential candidate can disassemble a political party, it speaks volumes about how strong a legacy its past two presidents really had. And that begins with the Iraq War, one of the greatest foreign policy mistakes in American history. President Trump remains focused on keeping his promises to the American people by bringing back jobs, promoting an America first foreign policy, and standing up for the forgotten men and women of our great country.